Alrighty, folks, welcome to episode number 1 of the Step Through Show. I am your host, Ben Castellino, and I am so excited to get back to podcasting, back in front of the mic. The world needs another NBA The world needs another NBA podcast, and we are here to deliver. Nah, I'm joking, but in all seriousness, it's been 4.5 years since I at least podcasted. I hosted a podcast from June of 2019 to April of 2022. If you were there at all in the SSP days and you're watching this now and you don't know me IRL, you're a real one. I appreciate you for real. And yeah, we were going to start this on Media Day, or not we, I mean, it's a one-man operation. I was going to start this on Media Day around, when the NBA calendar, NBA news, and the NBA content cycle really ramps back up into things, but I could not hold myself to wait any longer. So we're here on August 24th, 8/24. Shout out to Kobe. But yeah, I mean, I'm super excited. We got a semi-loaded episode for late August. I would argue a very loaded episode for late August. You typically don't have signings happen this late, and we actually still have a couple more. Jonathan Kuminga, we don't know where he's going to go. And then we have, I'm blanking on the other big thing in the NBA that I'm just blanking on it. There's something else that everybody probably is saying out loud right now. But anyway, without further ado, we do have 4 topics on today's slate that are all pretty juicy. I would argue probably 3 are juicy, and then 1 is kind of just one that I wanted to add in because I thought it was too funny to not include. But we'll start off with the Nuggets losing Peyton Watson. Just some big picture thoughts I have on the Jokic era in Denver. We'll then get into the Heat signing Klay Thompson, the biggest news from this weekend. Miami is now loaded up on shooting depth, the second most in the NBA. Really, like one of the more elite shooting teams now, from just a pure quantity perspective of how many guys they have who can shoot the ball at a high level. We'll get into a Jaylen Brown, Paul George comparison that I saw on a Ringer podcast from Michael Pena. And this is the fun topic I was alluding to earlier, which I don't want to reveal the quote yet because it is just too juicy. But this quote got so much backlash that the Ringer actually took down all their the clips they had for it on social across platforms because I guess the comment section was getting to them too much. They took it down, but we do have the transcript here. So yeah, I did actually also watch the video before, so that's why I was shocked when I was trying to look it up again. I'm like, where did it go? But I'm sure if I went to like Netflix or wherever they host their podcast, I could find it. But I know the context of it. I have the quote up here. We'll get into that. It's going to be a pretty funny topic. And then lastly, we have some expectations for the new look Lakers. Obviously, LeBron is going to headline the show for the most intriguing regular season storyline, his tenure in Philadelphia kicking off. But I think the Lakers are I think they're up there. Like, I would probably say the Lakers are the team that I personally am the most intrigued to see how they perform in the regular season, because I think the regular season performance from them is going to tell us a lot about how they'll perform in the playoffs and how their season will ultimately yield, because they're a young team. It's not exactly a team that's going to just like coast through the regular season. I think with Philadelphia, it's a little different because even if they are the 6th seed, the 5th seed in the regular season, I don't think you could panic yet just because of Embiid and LeBron. Like, if you get those two guys healthy in the playoffs, listen, I don't care what seed they are. They could be the 8th seed. They could be the 10th seed that climbs to the 8th seed. I would be scared to see them. I mean, it depends. On a couple matchups, the Philly, I don't think is too suited for. But that's another day to talk about. But let's start off with Denver losing Peyton Watson to the Cleveland Cavaliers. The Cavs finally get their athletic small forward that they've been looking for around 6 years now. It feels like since Isaac Okoro was drafted there in 2020. And specifically that first iteration of the first playoff team post LeBron, where they had Garland and the 2 bigs, Allen and Mobley. They obviously lacked wing size then. They had Okoro, obviously. Then they had Karis LeVert they tried out in a trade. They've had so many different people that they've tried bringing in Max Strus, who was solid for them, but he, I think, lacked the size to guard those bigger players, not exactly being the biggest guy. And Peyton Watson is the perfect frame, the guy with the perfect size to go along next to 2 smaller guards in Mitchell and Harden. So this was a A+ signing for Cleveland. I don't think you'll find much people who don't like that for Cleveland. I think the contract was even pretty good too, because I don't know, it's hard to like really evaluate contracts this early on, especially when they haven't even played. It's a 4-year deal, but $22 million a year off Peyton Watson's last season performance probably is a valid contract, let alone the fact that he's 23 years old and that his age 23, 24, 25, 26 seasons will be better, most likely, than his age 22 season was. And it actually looks like a deal that Cleveland, that looks like a positive contract, a net positive contract for them, but we'll obviously see how it pans out. For Denver, I don't blame them one bit for losing him. I've seen some talk that like, oh, it seems like people didn't come into the offseason with the same understanding that at least I had. I was under the assumption that Denver was not going to bring back Peyton Watson regardless. Now, I know Brian Windhorst said that there was like a chance before the Spencer Jones stuff, but even he reported that Denver's offer to him before the Spencer Jones contract was 4 years, $68 million. And that wasn't, and clearly that wasn't enough. Clearly Rich Paul, Peyton Watson's camp at large didn't accept the offer at the time, and rightfully so. Like that's a low ball for Peyton Watson. So that was their best offer before the Spencer Jones thing. Obviously, then bringing back Spencer Jones put them into the second apron, or maybe they were in before. That put them into the second apron, and then they obviously had no chance after that. They probably would have been able to sign him to, who knows what figure. And I guess their only hope was him taking the qualifying offer, which was never happening. And yes, I don't blame them one bit for losing Peyton Watson. The bigger picture story with Denver on this is that they're the only team in the second apron for this upcoming season, and it's because of the 5 contracts that they've signed, the 5 big contracts they have outside of Nikola Jokic. So obviously Nikola Jokic deserves the max. Doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure that out. But then next is Jamal Murray, who's also on a max contract, making $50 million a year. That was signed in 2024, I believe like September 2024, and it was an extension. Aaron Gordon is making $33 million a year. That was also a 2024 extension. They have Christian Brown making $22 million a year, but I believe it's going to scale up in the coming years because it's like the first year of his 5-year deal. It was a 5 for $125 deal signed last offseason. And then Cam Johnson is on the last year of his deal this upcoming season. But that was actually a good contract value swap because they got out MPJ, who's making much more. I don't know how much MPJ was making, but I believe MPJ was making at least like $35 a year. If I'm not mistaken. Let's look at this. Yeah, he was making 30. He used to make $38 million last year. He made $38 million last year. So Cam Johnson makes what, $23 million? So obviously that's why they had to give the 2031 pick, or was it their 2030? I think it was their 2032. I mean, it was like the deepest, which was 7 years out from last year. So yeah, 2032 pick. So that's why they had to give that out, because Cam Johnson's contract was, and I think that contract for Cam Johnson's a good contract. Like, sure, I guess you can be somewhat upset about his playoff performance and just his overall fit into Denver last year. But I also think the expectations of just looking at a player through pure points a game, when you have the offensive talent that Denver has, they have the best pick and roll duo in the league of Jamal and Jokic. You have Aaron Gordon. Were people expecting Cam to average 15 a game? I think people look at it from the pure points a game a little too much. So I think that's a fine contract for Cam Johnson. And then lastly, this contract is irrefutably bad. Zeke Naji making $8 million a year, or it's 7.4, but he signed that. I want to say he signed that after the championship season. But that was obviously a deal. Yeah, he signed in October 2023, a 4-year, $32 million extension. They thought he would be a key rotation piece for them on their bench. Things didn't end up materializing that way, but look, $8 million a year. It's somewhat of a big deal, and obviously that hasn't panned out. So there's that. There's 5 contracts to look at of why Denver is in this position where, look, this is why I don't like the framing of failed. It's because if you look at all these contracts, do I think any one of these deals is atrocious? No, they're all arguably marginally overpays. They're all marginal overpays. And obviously when you have 5 of those, or maybe like 4 of those, it adds up. I think the 2 to look at specifically though, because people always do this, right? Like, I think the first person people want to blame is who? Christian Braun, right? Because why? Oh, he fell off last year. Offensively, he was horrible. And people always point to like the 5th. He at the end of the day is the 5th highest paid player on this team. I'm sorry, but like, I think blaming Cam Johnson or Christian Braun's contracts is not addressing the root issue itself. You have to look at the big dog contracts when you evaluate teams overpaying and looking at their books. Because what it comes down to is, I think nobody's fault for this, right? But Aaron Gordon's contract is the answer, right? If we just want to keep it real, it's Aaron Gordon's contract is why Denver is in this spot. It's I want to make this very clear. It is not to Aaron Gordon's fault at all, right? Look at when Aaron Gordon signed this contract for Denver. He signed it in 2024 after he played 75, 73 in 68 games the prior 3 seasons. So he was healthy. And mind you, he played every possible game of those playoffs. In 2022, the one series versus Golden State, the 2023 championship run, and then the 2024 season versus LA and Minnesota. He played every NBA team would sign up all day for one of their top players, their 3rd best player, playing 70 games each season, playing all the games in the playoffs, being a 2-way demon. Like, hell yeah, bro. So it's like Denver, rightfully so, gave him the contract that he deserves. Like, duh, obviously. What's happened since in the last 2 years? Has Aaron Gordon become a worse basketball player? No, I don't think so. I don't think anybody rationally thinks that. But he's gotten hurt more. He played 51 games in 2025, 36 games last year, and then more importantly, he played 14 games. He played all the playoff games in 2025, but he played them severely hampered with a hamstring injury. And then in 2026, this year, he missed 3 of the playoff games in their 6-game series loss to Minnesota. So that is the answer. Like, when people try to overcomplicate things, right? And that's my biggest thing. If OG Anunoby for the Knicks this past playoff run got hurt, right? Would the Knicks have won the championship? No. No, they would not have won the championship. And I think it's just sometimes that cut and dry, especially with how this Denver roster is built around, where next to a center like Nikola Jokic, who isn't exactly this all-world defender, I mean, obviously, you need that 4 who has that positional size, that freak athleticism to be alongside the Joker, to be a functional defensive team, and to not be one of the worst defensive teams, and to not have that, like, hamper you and kind of be your Achilles heel in the playoffs. And that's what happened. He was hurt. So when you look at Denver, I think any team in the NBA would have a tough time if their 3rd highest paid player, the player who's their best defensive player, got hurt and has been relatively unavailable the last 2 seasons. So I think that right there is the answer to all this. Now, you can go a step further. I think you're kind of picking at the weeds, and you're pulling at strings, and you're trying to find, you're trying a little too hard to dig up on this. I think that right there is just plain and simple the answer. The Jamal Murray stuff is interesting because, sure, his contract is a max contract, which you could argue, yes, is a slight overpay. My counter to that is Jamal Murray is the only perimeter shot creator on the team. They don't really have this secondary ball handler. At least they haven't had that in this. I mean, Jokic obviously, but like, they don't have that secondary ball handler off the bench who can come in, create his own shot, create his own 3-point shots, who's going to alleviate that pressure on Jamal to really create all those perimeter opportunities. And you don't really see a lot of NBA teams have only one perimeter shot creator. And that's kind of what Denver's had. And that's why I think that's why they signed DeMar. DeMar's obviously not like this, all-world player, and he may not be a net positive player, but if there's one thing you can't deny, he can put the ball in the basket. He can create his own shot from the perimeter. So that's why they brought him in. So I don't know. I don't really know if I hate the Jamal Murray contract, because I think he's just being overburdened with too much of an offensive, from a an offensive creation load, not necessarily, or just like a shot creation load. Not obviously Jokic is a offensive engine, and obviously he is a ball handler, and he's all those things that you can name. But is Jokic a perimeter shot creator? I mean, I guess he is, but you know what I mean. He's not a perimeter shot creator in the traditional sense, which is why I think like they don't need another one next to them in the starting lineup. They need somebody off the bench, or at least in past years, they needed like a microwave scorer off the bench who can just kind of, again, in those, when Jokic is off the floor and Jamal's on the floor, someone alongside Jamal. I think that's what they needed the most specifically. And so I don't really blame Jamal, to be honest, because I think Jamal's a hell of a player. And name me another, I mean, obviously you probably can, right? Like Steph Curry, obviously. But Jamal is very compatible with Jokic, very compatible. So I just think it would be tough to replace him. And that's also the thing. So people have argued that, oh, they should have traded Jamal after the 2025 season, for example. Or they should have traded Jamal after the 2024 season. Heck, not even given him that contract. What I would say is this. Teams that recently won a championship have these blinders on, and rightfully so. Like, look at the Thunder this year. Let's say Jaylen Williams is up for an extension this summer instead of last summer. I know he already signed it last summer, FYI, for people who don't know, but let's say he was up for an extension this summer. Would they have not given him the contract, Oklahoma City? No, of course they would give him the contract. It is so, 2024, when you just won the title in 2023, it's hard to be like, you know what, you're actually not the guy. Even though we just did it and we had 1 year where we didn't do it, you know, we don't think you're actually the guy. We need someone better. Like, no, it's not exactly this decision that, I know in hindsight, it's easy to make it. It's easy to play my GM in hindsight and be like, oh yeah, we would have done that. But you just did it. You just did it recently. That's basically 1 year ago, but 2 years ago in the NBA season. Like, you just did it. I don't like, no one is expecting the Thunder right now to trade Jaylen Williams for a better co-star, but I guarantee you what the narrative's going to be in 3 years if the Thunder don't win in the next 3 years. Then people will be writing think pieces in 2029 about how, oh, why did the Thunder not trade Jaylen Williams in 2026? Well, it's like, dude, you're not going to exactly try to overhaul your roster when you just had recent success. Like, there's chemistry factors. Like, also, it's just like, from a team morale standpoint, like, everyone would be confused if you, I mean, not everyone, but like, it would just be like, was that really necessary? Like, did we really need to trade Jaylen Williams for, I don't know, let's say, who's a player we can use? Like, honestly, let's say Kevin Durant. I know this is like a weird example, but I think, because who did they want Denver to trade for in 2024? They clearly wanted Denver to trade for like a more experienced guard, just a guard with like more star power. And who would that have been in 2024? I honestly don't even know. Like, was it Kyrie? Obviously wasn't available for trade because he just was on the finals team at the Mavs. Like, I'm trying to really think like who they wanted Denver to trade for in 2024. But the point, whoever it was, the point is, I think I would make is, are we really sure that Denver's offense has been the reason they haven't won another title? Do we really think that it's been a lack of offense? Right? No, it's been a lack of defense. And why? I would argue, their best defender, their guy who's the perfect four that you would put in a video game alongside Nikola Jokic, Aaron Gordon, was out. That would be my reason. And I think it's kind of just that cut and dry. All right, let's move on to the Heat. And there's a lot to say on that. But I'm going to leave it at that because it's been 20 minutes, I believe, of a topic, and I don't want to drag these out too long. All right, let's move on to the Heat. They signed Klay Thompson over the weekend. It was yesterday specifically. Man, I love this move. I love it. Like, I'm not one of those people who thinks Klay, like, look, Klay obviously isn't like a good NBA player anymore, but from a morale, championship experience, vibe standpoint, I really mess with this move. So he was obviously bought out by the Mavs. He was on his final year of his contract this season. It was a 3-year deal he signed in 2024 to join the Luka Kyrie Mavs. Obviously, we know how that went. He signs a 2-year, $11.5 million deal with Miami. A player option is in year 2. So basically a 1-year, $5.25 million deal. And we'll see what happens after that. I mean, it's a player option. So if he plays bad, he'll be on the Heat next year. if he plays good, which obviously the Heat would love that, they'll have to look to restructure that or to sign him again. And Miami now has 7 players who shot over 38% from 3 last season. Only the Knicks have more. Now, one of these guys, Myron Gardner, doesn't play. He shot 41% last year on 1.4 3-point attempts a game. So, I mean, I don't expect him to be in the rotation. So let's just say 6 guys that they have that are like shooters in their 9-man rotation who are, or maybe it's like a 10-man rotation. But Bobby Portis shot 46% from 3 last year. Tim Hardaway Jr., 41%. Andrew Wiggins had a career season from 3, 41%. Davion Mitchell, 41%. Klay, 38%. But like, dude, you don't need to throw me a number at Klay. Like, can Klay Thompson shoot the basketball? Hell yeah. He's at 38% though from last year. And then Fontecchio at 38% as well. But then even throw away all these percentages, right? And really just like kind of look at the team. You look at they have a 9 or I would say, let's say a 10-man rotation. Because then the non-shooters that they have, the non-shooters, quote unquote, are Pell Larson, Bam Adebayo, Giannis, and then Drew Smith. And Jokic is not going to be in the rotation. So it's Drew Smith, Larson, and then obviously the big 2, Giannis and Bam. The thing that excites me about the most, and anyone who watched the Bucks over the last like 7-8 years when Giannis has been an MVP caliber player, is the Bucks have, I don't have the exact stat up on me, but I remember seeing that the Bucks over the last 8 years had like the highest 3-point percentage of any team in the NBA. And it's because when you have Giannis's gravity, you have the Brook Lopez getting wide open threes, the Bryn Forbes in the 2021 playoffs, wide open, or that series was Miami specifically, wide open threes. You have obviously Chris Middleton was that guy, you know, and obviously Brook Lopez was too. Like these guys would have shot well without Giannis. But I mean, there was so many guys over that Bucks tenure who shot the ball better. Look at Bobby Portis, 46% from 3. And Bobby was not exactly this like premier shooter before getting to Milwaukee, if I'm not mistaken. Like he could shoot it, but let's see his percentages before. I mean, he did shoot 40% from 3 with the Wizards in 2019. So okay, he did. I knew he could shoot, but I didn't know his attempts were always that high. But obviously that's also just the evolution of the 3. Or maybe I am literally just hallucinating on all these topics on this specifically. Because what did he shoot? He shot 4. He's been around like 3. Because I know in New York he shot 2.8 attempts in 2020, and then he actually shot less his first year in Milwaukee because he was off the bench. But then 4.4 last year, which is the important number for us to go off of. I mean, Bobby Portis can shoot the basketball, right? So that's that. Maybe I'm overstating. Maybe the Bucks have built the roster with a ton of shooters, but you can't deny the gravity that Giannis has, right? The gravity that he has attracting 2-3 defenders and then spraying out to shooters. So doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that Miami will be fine in that department. The department that Miami has to focus on, I think, is what I just touched on with Denver. Do they have enough perimeter shot creation of like guys who can just like put it on the floor, put the ball on the floor, 1-2 dribbles, rise up and shoot? And now I think Tim Hardaway Jr. is a guy who can underratedly do that. He can obviously, you know, shoot it off the catch as well as anyone, but he can put the ball on the floor and create some magic for himself. Wiggins, I think Wiggins can a little bit too. Wiggins has that bounce to him. They'll probably need, like you probably ideally would want one guy. Like for example, you would want a Norman Powell, who obviously they couldn't keep because of salary reasons, but you would want a Norman Powell, a guy who could put the ball on the floor consistently and get shots on the perimeter. They don't probably have that to the level you would want for an NBA team in 2026, but I mean, dude, the Miami roster is one of the more intriguing rosters because of the duo. Like, you never see a duo like this where, I don't think we've ever seen a duo in NBA history like this where you have Giannis paired with a center who's a defensive anchor, but like an offensive, Bam is obviously his defensive versatility gets talked about a ton, but Bam's offensive versatility is so unique for a center where even like, forget the 80-point game and whatnot, his ability to put the ball on the floor as a 5, to shoot the ball, to drive, to post up a little bit. Obviously, his post-up game is not that prevalent, but I mean, I've seen like Bam gets to work on the post here and there. Like he's a very unique, he has a very diverse shot portfolio for a 5. So to have that next to Giannis, like that's the most athletically like from an freaking defense. I mean, defensively, it goes without saying that they're defensively athletic freaks, but offensively, that's a very athletic duo that we haven't, I think, seen in NBA history before. And I'm super excited. You got the shooters. Again, you'd want the on-ball creation to be there more from the perimeter. But this team outside, I think this team is being underrated when they got Giannis initially. I would have loved to see LeBron there. I thought this was by far the best fit for LeBron from a basketball perspective, where he could play the point guard. He had the shooters around him even then with Portis, THJ, Wiggins, Davion. You had these, and then you had Giannis and Bam anchoring defensively the paint, where LeBron could be like the worst defender on the team. Like in Philadelphia, obviously with Joel, that's a little more tricky. There's not exactly that positional size there in Philly where he's the 4 defensively, and then that's a little worrisome. But in Miami, he would have been able to be the worst defender with Wiggins, with Davion, with himself, and then the 2 guys, Giannis and Bam. That would have been the perfect fit. But nonetheless, Miami's still, I think, going to be really, really good. I think Miami, I'll put it this way. I would not be surprised if Miami, should I say won the title? Like, I don't know. I'll say this. I would not be surprised if they won the East. If they won the East, that would not surprise me. Win the title, I mean, maybe though, maybe. I'm not, you know what? I'm not counting it out. I think Miami has like a top 5 odds to win the title next year. I mean, maybe because like I think the 2 teams in the West, and I would say they're in the top 3 in the East with New York, and yeah, I'll put them in the top 5. Maybe like number 6. We'll see. I haven't decided I haven't really like dove deep into it to like to know how I feel about it, but like they excite me a lot. Klay, the Klay Giannis duo, like the Klay Giannis Bam trio from just like a star perspective. Obviously Klay's not a star anymore, but just from like a name perspective, excites you. It's like, I think Klay can have himself a nice little bounce back season, like a nice little 14 points a game, shooting the ball like 40% from 3. Again, being at like that 6-man role where I'm not expecting him to start or to play heavy minutes, but when he comes in that flamethrower, I'm excited. That's a cool signing. And yeah, I think Miami should be super excited about this roster. The team, I think the big move for the future, right? Because when we look at like what Miami's gonna look like next season, 27-28, I think it's actually replacing Andrew Wiggins with a guy who's more offensively talented. Because Wiggins' salary is just too much to be they don't need another defender. I think they're like I mean, obviously it's great to have the defense. Like I think the defensively loaded team that they have this year will be incredibly fun to watch, but you would want to see some more on-ball stuff, and Wiggins on-ball as an offensive creator is just, there's more to be desired for the contract that he's on with that duo specifically. Like they don't need that much defense. And obviously like, that's kind of, maybe that's a wrong philosophy to have, because defense, you see how important it is in the modern NBA today. But yeah, that's just my thoughts on it. I think that could, like when I think of them versus OKC or San Antonio or New York, like that's what comes to mind. Like, are they going to have enough offense to win that series? And we'll see. All right, let's move on to the Jaylen Brown, Paul George comparison that I saw from Michael Pena of The Ringer. Don't know which, I think it was, I actually don't know which podcast this was, unfortunately. Maybe the basketball pod, like just the Ringer NBA pod. I think that's what it was, where Pena said, quote, "What does Jaylen Brown do at basketball that's definitively better than what Paul George does at basketball?" That's what he said. What does Jaylen Brown do at basketball that's definitively better than what Paul George does at basketball? And then his co-host Kyle Mann said, "People are unbelievably disrespectful to Paul George. He's been a better, more versatile defender. He's a way better pick and roll processor. He's a better shooter." And some of those points are fair. Like, he is a better pick and roll. I don't know about way better. Like, you're kind of gassing it. Like, way better pick and roll processor. I mean, sure, he's better than the pick and roll Paul George. Better shooter. I mean, sure, we'll give him that. Better shooter. Yeah, we'll give him that. I don't know about defender. And this is what I'll say about Paul George, right? So obviously Paul George's PR right now is at a kind of a 2-year high since 2024 from the playoff series versus Boston. What I'll say to that series that nobody seems to be talking about is his suspension, his 25-game suspension from late January to late March, where he got to be fully healthy, have no injuries, and just kind of be at home working on his conditioning, waiting to play playoff basketball. That's not going to that scenario. I mean, unless he intentionally gets suspended again for the same type of thing, that's not going to be a scenario that presents itself again this year. You can't just rest 2 months of NBA basketball and be just in much better conditioning, have less wear and tear on his body than every other player that you're competing against. That's just not going to happen again. And I think that's what's not being talked about with Paul George. Sure, he was phenomenal in that Boston series. And I think he was pretty good in the New York series too. At least offensively, he had a couple good moments in that series. But defensively, like, you kind of just see like his body did wear out a little bit in that New York series towards the end. And I think to expect that, like, the image that people have in their minds of, oh, he was clamping up Jaylen Brown, he was clamping up Jason Tatum. That was one series where he had all the rest in the world. I don't think we can just anticipate. Obviously, we can't anticipate that again. And he's only now a year older. He's going to be, 38, 37 this upcoming season? Probably 37. I think he was 36 last year. So, look, I mean, I'm high on Paul George. He's a great player, but I'll answer this question. What does Jaylen Brown do at basketball definitively better than Paul George? I don't know. The most important skill in basketball, in my opinion, which is applying pressure at the rim. What are we talking about here? That is literally the most important skill in basketball, to apply rim pressure. Can you actually get to the basket? And if there's one knock on 37-year-old Paul George, 36-year-old Paul George, it's that, what was he in the playoffs? Like, if you watch him offensively last playoffs, even versus Boston, what was he doing a lot in that series, right? Rising up and hitting those difficult long twos that he always has. He was a pull-up jump shooter. He was not getting to the rim. He was a jump shooter. And look, Paul George is a great jump shooter. He has the size, obviously, to just get to his spot, rise up, cash money. Like, we get it. But to ask the question, what does he definitively do better at basketball, when that is a fact? Did you watch the tape of what Paul George's offensive shot portfolio looks like now in 2026? Like, he's not getting to the basket. He's not putting pressure on the defense, getting to the free throw line consistently by getting to the basket. He's not athletic enough. He doesn't have that first step anymore. Jaylen Brown was arguably the best player at doing that in basketball last year. Now, not the best, but top 5. I mean, he was 6 in MVP voting for a reason. That's probably the staple of his offensive game, is getting to the basket, getting downhill, just the force and the explosiveness he has with a head of steam downhill. And you're asking that question? Like, that's the most obvious answer. That is the most important offensive skill in basketball. I don't care what anybody says. I mean, that's obviously the most important skill in basketball. You can be a great shooter, but if you actually can't blow by your defender, and this is on any level of basketball. Like, I think this is something that I experienced in why, like, my basketball career. Like, obviously, I'm not going to get into that, but like, any level of basketball, especially in the NBA, it's getting to the rim. It's being able to beat your defender off the dribble and get past him. That's literally the core skill of basketball. So I don't know how you even say this, but yeah. So that's the comparison. That's the situation with Jaylen Brown and Paul George. Paul George is still a great player. Paul George fits what Boston's trying to do better from a pace and space perspective of not having 2 ball dominant players. Like, there is some merit to the fact that, obviously, Brad Stevens alluded on the fact that the reason why they traded Jaylen Brown was because he's making 30% of the cap, and that his next extension, he would make 35% of the cap, which is really what this is all about, because everybody keeps saying like, oh, they have the same contract. And that is true. They do have the same contract. Paul George is just one less year. But the main thing is, would Paul George demand an extension on his max extension at that in his next deal? No, obviously not. Would Jaylen Brown? Yes. Jaylen Brown wants a max extension, in which it's going to be a 35% max now, because it's a 10-year veteran max. So that's why they needed to trade him. It wasn't about, like his current contract and his current contract. Yeah. Boy, I think people just, people get lost on why they traded Jaylen Brown. That was one component, probably the component to it. And then another like subplot to it is the fact that, do you really need two wings who have overlapping skill sets to some degree? Like you want to see Peyton Pritchard with the ball more. You want to play at that pace and space, faster style of play where Jason Tatum's driving, kicking, spraying his shooters. So I think that was, and obviously if you could have kept Jaylen Brown, like you want both those guys driving and kicking to those shooters. But the reality of the NBA is you got to pick one. You can't have two guys making 35% max deals. Now you can have, if they were on the 30% max contracts, you can give you a little more flexibility, but on the 35% both, that's tough. And that is something to be argued with the new CBA. And I'm sure the NBA will address this in the next CBA, because this is the reality of, if you drafted well and those guys end up both staying on your roster for 10 years, they both are eligible for that 10-year max extension. Jason Tatum, you get 35% of the cap. Jaylen Brown, you get 35% of the cap, and it leaves you in a very tough spot. And that's what happened with Boston. And yeah. All right, so let's move on to the last topic of the day, shall we? Hopefully this hasn't been an unlistenable episode. It may have been, because this is my first podcast episode in 4.5 years. So go easy on me, guys. Go easy on me, chat. But let's dive into the Lakers, because I do think, like I said in the intro, that this is one of the most interesting teams this season. I think I'll say it, the most interesting team that, for me, I'm interested to see how they play in the regular season. They're number one. And I think the big question with the Lakers, obviously they're on their Slovenia trip. We're seeing all the clips. We're seeing the vibes high. Oh, like new look Lakers. It's all fun and dandy right now. The big question is the Grimes, Mamu, Shelley, I'm just going to say Mamu. Is the Grimes, Mamu, and Kessler front court, the wing and front court combination, is that enough to subsidize for the Luka Reeves backcourt defensively? Do they have enough size with those three guys? I think obviously Mamu and Kessler is a hell of a duo for the front court with a Luka Reeves backcourt. You have a 6'10 Mamu, Walker Kessler, who's a shot blocking demon, one of the best rim protectors in basketball, a young rim protector at that. So I think Walker Kessler is a fantastic signing for the Luka Austin Reeves combination. And obviously Mamu is 6'10. He's definitely someone who defensively plugs in really nice at the 4 spot, and his ability to shoot. I think Mamu, Kessler, Luka Reeves, that's fantastic. Quentin Grimes at the 3 gives you some on-ball creation, which I like. And QG was a great defender in New York. He wasn't as good of a defender in Philadelphia. I guess that could be because he was asked to burden more of an offensive load. But I think even him, that's a solid. He's a solid 3. I don't know if he's a solid 3 defensively. I think maybe you would want him as like a 2 defensively, because if he's asked to go like a 6'7", 6'8" player, and him being 6'5", that might be a little too much to ask. But even then, I don't think that's horrible. And I think like this is a question that I don't even have an answer to yet. Like, is it enough? We'll see. I think that's like the most fascinating scenario, because if it is enough, like let's say this team really is a top half defensive unit, they're like the top 15 at least, 14th, 13th in the NBA, whatever, then hell yeah, they're going to be a contending team in the NBA. Of course. Because offensively, you have Luka Reeves. I think even that alone, like saying the words Luka and Reeves offensively, I think you say the word Luka Doncic and you pair him with another all-star level guard. You saw it with Kyrie. You saw it with Jalen Brunson and Spencer Dinwiddie in 2022. Like, the offense is going to be fucking incredible. The offense is going to be great. They're going to be enough to be a top 5 offense in the league. So the answer is really, can they hold up defensively? I think my gut tells me they can. Like I think that Mamu Kessler pairing is good. When Jake LaRavia is the 4, I even think he's, I don't know, for a 4 defensively if he's an ideal fit. And I even think the lineup of you put Jake LaRavia instead of Quentin Grimes at the 3, that is a lineup that I love a lot because you have LaRavia at 6'7", Mamu 6'10". Like that's a lot of size and a lot of like Jake LaRavia is a solid on-ball scorer. And he can get, he can get downhill. He can beat his man off the dribble, put the ball on the floor. So I think those 3 with Luka and Reeves, like we might have something. I think the Lakers might actually, and that's the big question. Because if the Lakers can be what the 2023 Nuggets were defensively, which I think they were like the 10th rated defense, or maybe they were 11th. I don't even think they were in the top 10 defensively. And they were the only team to not be top 10 defensively and like win the championship in quite some time. If they can be around that level of defensive team, then they can win the not win the championship. They can maybe win the championship. I think I wouldn't count the Lakers. I'm not one of those people who just is going to write the Thunder and Spurs into the conference finals. I'm not. I know that's like a popular thing to do, but the NBA changes too much year to year, and people are like gassing the Thunder and Spurs that they're like the Avengers, bro. Like, let's relax. They're not these unbeatable teams. They have flaws themselves, like we saw this past season. So, if the Lakers are, I'll put it this way: if the Lakers are a top 10 defense, do I think they're in that Thunder Spurs tier? I actually think they are. I think they are. I would have loved. I mean, if they got Peyton Watson, for example, dude, like, oh my gosh. Like, come on. Like, I want them to have that, instead of Quentin Grimes or Jake LaRavia, even, I want them to have that, like, 6'8", like, athletic freak who's, like, this, like, strong dude with Mamu Kessler. I want them to have as much size as possible and actually, like, playable size. So you have Jared Vanderbilt, but he wasn't really playable. He hasn't really been playable these past, really last season specifically, but yeah, I think I do like the Grimes for the extra offense though, and also LaRavia, like, and Mamu for some good spacing. So they have, I think, a good balance here. We'll see how it pans out, but I think they do have a good balance here. I know. Look, I know you can bat on them or bash on them for utilizing and dumping out all the assets that they had for the future and using the cap space, using the draft picks, but my counter would be, and I think the Lakers' rationale with it was, are we going to wait with a prime Luka Doncic 1 year? We're just going to fold another year down the toilet? Look, they made the most of what they had. You can bash it, but I actually think Walker Kessler will be looked back on as a good sign because I think it has that Rudy Gobert Minnesota potential. I do. I think it has the potential where you look at the Ant and how much Ants and the Wolves have been elevated by Rudy Gobert's top 5 defense, just a walking top 5 defense that he seems to yield. I think we could see a similar kind of a relationship here with Luka and Kessler. This is the kind of big you want. And look, if they were able to like snag one of them, like those bigs that he had in 2024, PJ Washington, Daniel Gafford, specifically PJ Washington, like PJ Washington is like the player that you want around like the Lukas and the Jokic's of the world, like an Aaron Gordon is, like the slower, I mean, you guys know, like the slower kind of just cones defensively, if we're just going to be honest. You want those athletic freaks who can shoot the ball too, who can really do everything. They're just so versatile. They can guard 1 through 4. So, I mean, if they could have got Peyton Watson, if there's a world where they could have gotten PJ Washington, obviously they're not going to be able to, like, they obviously not. They wouldn't have been able to get him ever since maybe the Kessler deal. But if you could hypothetically in like a dream world place PJ Washington for Grimes, who's to say that this wouldn't be a championship caliber roster? And who's to say even now? Like, I think people are just writing off the Lakers a little too fast. Like, we haven't even seen Luka yet back in the playoffs. Obviously, we saw him in 2025, but that was just a team that was on the fly with Bron, the trade deadline stuff. That's tough to, have that continuity from a team that was traded together at the deadline. If there's one thing from Luka we've seen it. 2022, the Mavs incredibly overexceeded expectations. 2024, same thing. 2021, even same thing, pushing the Clippers team to 7 games that was the title favorite. 2020 in the bubble again. I'm kind of sound like a Luka like dick rider here, but like I'll just say this. I think in the West, the Thunder and Spurs to me aren't these invincible juggernauts. And I think the Lakers, I think the Nuggets could also, make a play. Why not? Although their case is a little weakened just because their bench is just actually non-existent. But I don't see why the Lakers can't insert themselves in that Thunder Spurs tier, right? And I'm not even saying this because like for hyperbole reasons, I legitimately think that. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, I think, look, get Luka some defense, and I think things are going to be good. I mean, Luka and Reeves, they're just too talented. It is a very comparable duo to the Luka-Kyrie backcourt. I mean, Reeves and Kyrie, there's a lot. I know I'm not trying to disrespect Kyrie because obviously like prime Kyrie, bro, like obviously was that guy. But you look at 2024 Kyrie and current day Austin Reeves, I mean, they're very comparable like combo guard players who can play. I'm saying that in like a complementary sense where they could both play on the ball and off the ball incredibly well. And they both have just like such fluid games. Now, I don't know. I'm not trying to, I love Kyrie, bro. I love Kyrie, but 2024, like I think there's a difference between like 2021 Kyrie and 2024 Kyrie. Like there was like, dude, 2021 Kyrie, like there was just like a more of a bounce to him. It felt like. And maybe I'm being disrespectful to Kyrie. I may be slighting him a bit, but I do think this backcourt is on par with the Luka-Kyrie backcourt. And if they can just, if this defensive front court can hold up like the Mavs did in 2024, we could see something bounce and shake here for LA. So it's going to be interesting. We'll see though, right? And that's going to be it for episode number 1 of the Step Through Show. Hope you guys enjoyed. Leave a rating on an Apple Podcast, on Spotify, on YouTube, like this video, subscribe to the channel, do all those things, please. If not, it's all good too. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace out.